Welcome to MadLit Musings, the podcast where you get to eavesdrop on your favorite authors without getting caught. I've been stoked to have authors like Angela Hunt, Bill Myers, Nicole Deese, Tessa Afshar, comedian Bob Smiley, and more on the show, and this year I have another great lineup of storytellers and truth-sayers. If you love to eavesdrop at coffee shops like I do, this is the podcast for you. It's where we get real, we get tough, we laugh, and we might even cry. It's where we meet authors on a different level, where every story and podcast episode has its own heartbeat. So hang out with me today. I'm Jaime Jo Wright, your host at MadLit Musings. This is your podcast for real chats with real authors about real life. Today's episode was brought to you by Baker Publishing Group, with Revell and Bethany House Publishing as divisions. We're super excited to be sponsored by Baker Publishing Group and to bring you their fabulous authors and their fabulous lineup for 2025. Be sure to check them out at bakerpublishinggroup.com and also check out their online bookstore at bakerbookhouse.com. Hi, everyone. It is Jaime Jo Wright here at MadLit Musings, and I'm really excited today to have Elizabeth Camden with us. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi. Thank you for welcoming me aboard.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure everybody who's listening, as they know, this is the podcast to eavesdrop on because we like to just sit and chit chat. And so it's always fun to see where conversation takes us when we talk books and history and life. So super cool. Now, you've written quite a few novels. I was trying to think before I came on how many you've got to your name now, because I've been reading your novels, it seems like, for a long time.
My first one came out in 2011, and I've been doing a little more than one a year. So I think at this time it's about 17.
Okay. Look at that.
I know.
You're barreling toward that 2-0 mark.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to it too.
I bet. I was looking online today, and of course this will post a little bit later in the season, but Julie Clausen just released her 20th novel today, and I was like, wow, that's so cool.
Right.
That's
and I
so
remember
great.
the first time I published a book, you're so excited and you spend so many years on your first book. I think with your first book, you spend a lot more time honing and polishing it than any other book because the publication time lag is so long.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, well, I'll never have 8 and 10 and 12 books like some of these other authors in that publishing house. But sure enough, here we are. Time rolls on.
Here we are. And the neat thing is when you get to those types of numbers, you're like, wow, readers like my stories.
Yes.
Like, wow.
Because everybody, at least I have that imposter syndrome.
All the time.
It was just a fluke that they picked me up. I had a lot of novels that got rejected before my first novel got picked up. And so I really thought, well, this must be a fluke. They're going to figure me out. That it's, can I even reproduce it? Can I get the second book to the finish line, a third book?
Yep.
But I guess at this point I can say, there's readers, and they wouldn't still be offering me contracts if the readers weren't buying.
No.
So here I am.
No, you've got a following of faithful readers that are looking forward to all the books that you're releasing. So this is great.
Thanks.
And you're releasing one this January. It's book 2 in the Women of Midtown series.
Yeah.
And it's called When Stars Light the Sky.
Right. Yeah, it's the second book in a trilogy, but you do not need to read the first at all.
Okay.
The only link between the books is that the women all live in this same apartment complex in Manhattan around the years of World War I. And so this book features a woman who immigrated to the United States when she was a young girl. She came from Germany, so she's fluent in German.
Okay.
And she is the world's best secretary with shorthand. She knows telegraphy.
Mm-hmm.
And so she becomes the secretary to the ambassador to Germany.
Ooh.
And this is based on an actual historical character. His name was James Gerard. And for those people who are watching, I'm holding up a book right now. This is James Gerard's memoirs that I picked this book up when I was in college. You know how sometimes college libraries have sales of old dusty books that haven't been checked out in 50 years?
Yes.
I have no idea why I picked this book up, but I picked this up when I was in college and I read it. And it's fascinating. This was his memoirs that he wrote covering his 4 years as ambassador to Germany.
Wow.
And you might think that this is a dull and boring diplomatic book. You would be wrong. This book is full of gossip and intrigue. And he was a real, he liked a good time. He liked to hunt and party and go yachting, and he was friends with everybody. So there are scenes in the book where he's hunting with the Kaiser's sons, or on the yacht with the Kaiser, going to the opera with the Kaiser's wife. And so it was a fascinating insight into World War I that I don't think is usually covered. There are no trenches in this book. There are no hospitals in this book. This is set in Berlin.
Okay.
And this is the World War I never came close to Berlin. So this is set during this twilight era. In fact, my original title for the book was Twilight in Berlin.
Ooh.
My publisher was a little worried that the word Berlin might turn people off. So it's renamed When Stars Light the Sky, which still sort of hints at that twilight era.
Yeah. Yeah.
The golden age, the Gilded Age is coming to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going into a period where there's a great uncertainty in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And the American embassy is this enclave of people. We didn't get into the war until the first 2 years, 1914 to 1916. We were not involved. And that's when the book is set.
Okay.
So the diplomats are trying to keep peace between the warring powers. And my German-American secretary is right there with her sleeves rolled up and in the thick of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's such, I think that's one of the things with the World Wars too, is there is so much focus on World War II that a lot of people don't realize how much of World War II was because of World War I and all of the politics. And like you said, it's just kind of the twilight. Everything's starting to shake and tremble a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the World War I era. It's still got the hint of the old world, long dresses, gallant manners, all of that. It's still got that. But we're moving into the 20th century and they're moving fast. And there's a lot of the bad stuff coming. But this book was really focused on the diplomacy aspect and what it was like to live in the embassy during this very unusual time period.
Right, right. So living in an embassy, what would have been different in that day and age than like modern times? I mean, not that any of us have ever lived in an embassy anyway, so it's not like I have a high standard to compare it to, but...
Do you remember when I told you that James Gerard was a party animal?
Yes.
He was also one of the richest men in America.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. He got his appointment to be ambassador for political reasons because he gave a ton of money to Woodrow Wilson and he delivered the state of New York for Wilson because he was very well connected.
Okay.
So he was completely unprepared to be ambassador. He did speak German, but aside from that, he was there to kind of have a good time.
Yeah.
Nobody saw World War I on the horizon. Well, he wanted to have a nice house, and he did not like the American embassy, which was in, when it was purchased, it was when America was not quite the world power.
Okay.
And so James Gerard bought a castle for the embassy, and he moved in. Now, the staff did not. The staff I have living, half a mile away.
Okay.
And so they kind of have some privacy in their house, and they have very close relations there. But the embassy itself was in this beautiful palace. But the workaday life of the embassy is probably similar to what it is today. You're handling a lot of the book is about trying to get Americans out of Germany who wanted to leave. One of the big changes that happened in World War I, there was such a thing as passports. Passports weren't a thing before World War I. So a lot of the staff, including my heroine, arrived in Germany without an American passport. Once the war was declared, Germany cracked down, and they wanted you to prove you were not German to leave. They were afraid that doctors and nurses and engineers were going to leave.
Sure.
So they didn't want any Germans leaving the country.
Right.
So you had to prove you weren't German, which she had difficulty doing because she spoke with an accent, and she was German.
Right, she was German, just American German, yeah.
But now this book is a romance, and this is not too big of a spoiler to say that this is a marriage of convenience story.
Okay.
And so one way that she would be able to leave the country is if she was married to a high-ranking diplomat, which is what happens fairly early in the novel. Okay. And so it's a marriage of convenience, basically just if they have to leave in a hurry, she can leave. But the man that she marries is her complete opposite. because she is a sunny, joyful, optimistic person.
Mm-hmm.
And the Benedict, who is the chief of the diplomatic corps, is a very straight-laced, old-school diplomat he is the main guy carrying out the business of the embassy.
Okay.
The actual ambassador is a party guy. He doesn't know what to do. It's up to his staff to carry out the business of the embassy. So Benedict has a lot of stress on his shoulders as he is trying to keep America out of the war. The stakes couldn't be higher for him.
Right.
And now he's got to deal with this secretary who he doesn't really care for. He doesn't like this girl who's always cheerful, always cracking a joke.
Mm-hmm.
But he steps up to the plate and is a noble man and marries her in what is believed to be just a simple marriage convenience. It's going to be annulled as soon as they get back to the States.
Of course.
That is the setup of the novel. But of course, things are never going to go quite so smooth.
No, it would be a very anticlimactic novel if it went that smoothly.
Yeah, right.
And we're back in America, and now the marriage is annulled. The end.
Right.
Fun. It's so interesting where story ideas come from. And I think it's interesting that this came from an older book that you get from a book sale at the university.
Uh-huh.
Do we see the ambassador that's in the actual book that you read? Is he carried into, or is he fictionalized?
No. I actually use his name.
Okay.
And there's some pictures in the book that, gosh, I would love to get included in the book. Pictures of him. He was a very handsome man.
Okay.
And he bought a very nice castle in Berlin. And there's pictures of the castle that he lived in.
Everybody's going to rush out to buy this book now. Find old copies.
Right. He was an interesting man because he was, as much as he was a party animal, he was also very pugnacious.
Okay.
And his temper got the better of him. He locked horns with a lot of people, and yet it turned out he was the right man for the job, because some of the actions in the book, in my novel, are drawn straight from his memoir. They were very bombastic, but they did cut through to the journey. And it is believed people gave James Gerard credit for keeping America out of the war longer than might otherwise have happened.
Wow.
The Lusitania, for those of you who remember your old World War I history, the Lusitania was a ship that had a lot of Americans on it, and it went down early in the war. And America was almost dragged in right then.
Right.
And a lot of people wanted us to just accept an apology and do nothing. But he was very bombastic, and he demanded a cease of submarine warfare. Going towards American ships or ships that Americans might have been on. And I believe, and a lot of historians have given him credit, because of his rather obnoxious and bombastic way of carrying out diplomacy, that he may have kept us out of war at least a year longer than otherwise would have happened.
Wow. And that's no small thing. Really.
No small thing.
It is no small thing.
When you look at the numbers of casualties on the Western Front and the Eastern Front, Americans did not suffer nearly, maybe a tenth of what the Germans and the French and the British suffered.
Right. Now, that had to have been such an interesting era. I'm thinking of your heroine, and her name is Inga Klein.
Yeah.
An interesting period of time for women, too, because, World War II is known for being when all the men were gone, off to war, the women really rose up. But now we're kind of in this cusp before that.
Right.
How did you bring that into play with her life? And she's in this role as a secretary and all that.
She was a poor immigrant.
Okay.
She was quite poor. And in my story, she encountered James Gerard, the guy who became the ambassador, very early, and he sent her to secretarial school as an act of charity. And she felt she owed him one. When he came a-knocking saying, I need a secretary I can trust, she felt she did not want to go to Germany, but she felt she owed him because he had put her through school.
Yeah.
So she had to work. Back then, most women did work, especially the poor immigrant women. They might have worked in their home, doing mending or sewing or making shoes. She worked at the New York harbor sending telegraph messages.
Okay.
But so she knew how to do a lot of the stuff that his secretary would have known how to do. And so she is a skilled secretary, and she speaks German. She's got everything she needs to be a good secretary in the American embassy.
Yeah. That's so cool. And one of the things that I like about your books, and for readers, if you're listening and you've not read an Elizabeth Camden book yet, is they are, I think, categorized as historical romance. But I would say there's a lot more heft to these books than others in the historical elements, and so much of the interesting careers you have the women involved in, and the interesting places that you take us. What do you find, how would you say your writing differentiates from other historical romances that are out there in a positive way?
I think that I try to balance the romance, because I love romance. I love it. And so it's always a huge part of the book, but I do try to bring it into, I set it in an interesting historical era.
Mm-hmm.
One of my issues is that I don't have children of my own, nor did I grow up on a farm. And a lot of historical romances in inspirational fiction are set on the prairie or on a farm.
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about these things. I was a single woman until I was 35. So until I was 35, I worked.
Yeah.
I was primarily a librarian in university libraries.
Okay.
And so I know how to do the research for interesting historical professions. I didn't really want to set a book in something I knew nothing about.
Right.
But in most of the women in the era that I write in, which is 1880 to the end of World War I,
mm-hmm.
most of these women did work, and they were finally moving into some of the professions. So I do have women working as laboratory assistants,
mm-hmm.
or as a photographer,
mm-hmm.
or as a paralegal. These were all acceptable careers for women.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes me into a business. And so a lot of the book will be set. I've done books about the steel industry. I did
mm-hmm.
books about trying to cure tuberculosis, which took me into a hospital in a research setting. And so I'll always have I hope my reader will learn something interesting about the steel business, or about World War I, what it's like to live in an embassy. The perfume industry. I did one about perfume.
Yes.
So that's, I think, what makes me a little different, and that I will do a deeper dive into an industry that the readers may not be familiar with, but I'm going to try to make it really interesting, really fascinating.
Right, because if you were to say you were writing a historical romance surrounding the steel industry, I mean, you're not necessarily expecting a flock of readers to race out after it, but yet at the same time, when you start reading the back cover copy and you're like, this sounds really good, it's neat because we get transported as readers to a time period that was critical in American history and American economics and all of that we may not otherwise read about.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. And now we get to go to Berlin. How exciting.
Yeah.
So did you go to Berlin to research this?
I have been to Berlin in the past, but I did not get to go to research this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that didn't happen. Sometimes I did get to go. I am working on a book. It's not going to be out till next year. It's a contemporary romance set in the Arctic Circle. I did go to the Arctic Circle for that one.
I did.
Yeah, I did. And so I've been both to Antarctica and to the Arctic in Norway. So I've been to both poles. And I thought, I've got to write a book about this, because this is such a different world.
No kidding.
And it's a place very few people get to go. And I was lucky enough to go. And I just couldn't wait to get home and start writing that book. But I'm afraid I don't have a title or a cover or even a release date. But that one is going to be a contemporary romance, and it'll probably be out in late 2026, I would say.
All right. Well, the important thing there for readers is to follow you online then.
Absolutely.
And you sign up for your newsletter and everything.
Right. Yeah, that would be great.
So I have to ask then, based on that, if you've been to the North and the South Pole, I've always wondered which one is better.
The South Pole, I would say Antarctica was more fascinating because it's empty. It is empty, and it's fascinating, and it's eerie. It's very hard to get to. Mm-hmm. You're going to be on a ship for about 4 or 5 days, and it's a rough crossing.
Oh my!
But north, the Arctic, the North is much easier to get to, because Norway is There are roads in Norway. You can actually drive up there, and the weather's not quite as bad.
Yeah. So fun.
But there's a lot more, there's a lot of people who live up there. There's villages, there's entire communities who live there. Whereas in Antarctica, there's nothing but a few scientific communities down there.
Yeah, it's really desolate. Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. I'm gonna have to add that to my bucket list of things to do is go to Antarctica, because that just sounds extremely adventurous and fun.
It was
I
fun.
would be up for that. I would be up for that. But in the meantime, maybe I'll hit up Berlin on the way.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's right on the way, right?
And yeah, that one you can get to pretty much easier.
Awesome. Okay, so again, this is book 2 in what I believe is a trilogy, correct?
Right.
So we have one
right.
more coming out
Right.
in this series. All right.
But I'll just reiterate that this entire trilogy, there's not even overlapping characters so much.
Okay.
So you can pick up this book and it has a satisfying ending,
Mm-hmm.
no cliffhangers, and you won't feel lost. So this is a good book to start if you want
Awesome.
to pick it up, and you won't feel lost at all.
Great. Well, the book is called When Stars Light the Sky. It's by Elizabeth Camden, published by Bethany House Publishers, and it comes out in January. So we are not too far away from its release.
Yeah.
So awesome. If readers want to follow you so they can find out more about these books and ones coming in the future, where's the best place for them to do that?
Okay, well, elizabethcamden.com is my website, but I'm most active on Facebook.
Okay.
On Facebook, I'm just author Elizabeth Camden, and I do interesting historical posts, little tidbits of trivia and interesting factoids from the eras that I write about.
Mm-hmm.
And I also try to promote other books that I think my readers would like. And so that's on Facebook, or you can sign up for my newsletter, which you can see my newsletter sign up on my website or on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, this was super fun. I mean, all the things that we talked about today, I'm not sure which one was the most fun. We made it to Germany. We made it to Antarctica. We talked about U.S. embassies and philanthropists and all kinds of fun stuff.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. This is always a real treat to speak with you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap for today here at MadLit Musings. I hope you join us again. And if you want to, be sure you like and subscribe here at your favorite podcast player or on YouTube, because you won't want to miss all the wonderful alerts that let you know when we have another conversation for you to eavesdrop on.